All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get Grand Round started. Dr. Broussard has recently done the Valentine Grand Round. We do that here, and this year it's on Valentine's Day, so I'm sure we have a special Grand Rounds that we're in store of.
Well, we'll see. So I kind of changed gears. This is the third time in however many years I've been doing this that I do Valentine's Day, just because I kind of like to lead in with the story about why we're doing this on Valentine's Day. The story's going to be a little bit different this year than what it has been in the past. Let's get the niceties out of the way. I have no disclosures. So the story that I've told in the past is the story about the Valentine's Day Massacre that happened in Chicago back in the early 1900s. And that was masterminded by Al Capone, who ultimately died in prison of neurosyphilis. So we talked about congenital syphilis the last two times on Valentine's Day, because it is kind of the gift that keeps on giving. We're going to change gears a little bit this year. I'm going to tell a different story. I'm going to go all the way back to the 3rd century in the Roman Empire. And there was the Emperor Claudius Gothicus. He was nicknamed Claudius the Cruel because he had he was a very harsh leader, tendency for getting into wars and abusing people. And he was getting into so many wars during the 3rd century that he was having a difficult time recruiting enough soldiers. He thought that was because the soldiers didn't want to leave their loved ones and their wives, so he decided he was just going to say nobody can get married anymore. You can't get engaged, you can't get married. And he was so mean, nobody ever wanted to go against him. Well, there was this Christian priest named Valentine who did come forward, and he stood up for love, as you would expect on Valentine's Day. And he began secretly marrying soldiers before they went off to war, even though it was against the emperor's orders. Well, Claudius the Cruel found out about it, and he was jailed and sentenced to death. But while Valentine was in jail, he fell in love with the jailer's daughter. She was a blind woman, but the night before he was executed, he wanted to write her a sonnet. He didn't have any ink or anything. So he actually squeezed ink out of a violet and wrote her a sonnet, and he signed it, "Your Valentine." Well, as the story goes, supposedly his sonnet gave her sight again, but he was still executed anyway. So whenever you go back and you start looking at all this, you know, they killed the man, but they didn't kill the spirit of love. And the Catholic Church actually made him a saint, Saint Valentine. So that's where Saint Valentine comes. And the Catholic Church wanted to actually have a feast on to honor Saint Valentine. But do you know why they picked February 14th? Well, they picked that because the ancient belief is that birds, particularly lovebirds, start mating season that day. So that's where February 14th comes from. And that's where the Valentine's Day, at least that's one of the stories I was able to find. So whenever you think about Valentine's Day, you think about love and sacrifice and commitment. And it is Thursday, we are at work. So what we're going to talk about today in the work setting, a few years ago I lost my mind and decided that an MBA would actually be a good thing for me to have. And so I went back to school and did this, and one of the classes I took was called Organizational Behavior. Heck's Organizational Behavior. And so we're going to talk about what that is. And in the process, we'll talk about the importance of teamwork and the characteristics of highly effective teams, and demonstrate ways that you can kind of recognize and eliminate and negotiate when conflict comes into play, and then create your own power bases. And that statement means nothing meant nothing to me at that point, probably doesn't, but we'll get there. And most of what we do here at work, you know, in the past I've talked about personality differences and how you can identify how people have a different personality and a different work style, and how do you make all that fit together. And we've talked about the individual a lot. We're going to take it one step further this year, and we're going to go more into the teamwork aspect. But organizational behavior is the study of human behavior within organizations itself. And it's an academic discipline that's devoted to understanding the individuals, the teams, the interpersonal processes, and the organizational dynamics. We're actually going to talk about each one of these a little bit, some more than others. And the whole point of this is so that you can build solid job skills and expand your potential for career success in the workplace. And the workplace these days is very dynamic. It's shifting, it's complex, it's getting more complex as you add more technology into it. And so you need to know how to build your solid base. And that's kind of where the power bases come into play. So the first thing that we'll talk about is the study of human behavior in organizations. And basically, this is what people expect and value in terms of human behavior within organizations. So everybody places an importance on connections and networks. And this is so that you can build effective relationships face-to-face and online. And it's a must-have career skill these days. You have to be able to build connections and networks. There's a commitment to ethical behavior. So if you think about all of the publicized scandals in the past, they are there, they are real, and there's a growing intolerance to these scandals. So ethical behavior is very important. There's broader views of leadership. It's no longer top-down. Everybody is a leader in their own, in their own position. All members have leadership of some sort, regardless of what your hierarchy is. There's an emphasis on human capital and teamwork. So human capital, that's just valuing humans as assets in the workplace and realizing that their knowledge and experience and their commitments are really important. And then teamwork we'll talk about a whole lot in a little bit. There's demise of the command and control. There's no more, I'm your boss and I said so, that's why. The younger generations aren't putting up with that, and we have also learned that that's not really the best way to do things all the time. Influence of information technology. There's technology everywhere. And this is actually, it has implications for work arrangements. There's many different ways to accomplish the same thing. You don't have to be at work, at your desk, in a building from 8 to 5. You can do things remotely now. There's respect for new workforce expectations. Again, the new generation is a little less tolerant of the hierarchy of things. The new generation is more high-tech and really less concerned with status. I'm here, I'm getting my job done, I'm an important part of the team. It doesn't matter if my title is president or peon. It doesn't matter. Let's just get our jobs done. There's a changing concept of what careers really are. So with all the new technology and the changing workforce, there's a need for special skill sets. And so what happens is you end up with more independent contractors and freelancers that specialize in one particular area or the other. And then there's a concern for sustainability. The younger generation has a top priority that they're more focused on the environment and climate and preservation of our resources. And we really do all need to worry about sustainability of everything. So individuals, again, we've talked about this a lot. You've heard about this on every rotation, every talk. We've talked about diversity. You should know what it is. We have an entire department of diversity affairs. I'm not going to go into that. Personality, I've talked about that also. That's where the Myers-Briggs personality indicators come in and what that's all about and how your personalities affect everything. Values, what do you find important? Perception, that's kind of where stereotypes and projection come in. Well, if this happened to me, I would react this way, so I'm going to project that onto you. Attribution, trying to find a cause for something. So you get a bad evaluation. What's the cause of it? Did you have a bad day because your mom called you and said she had been in a wreck that morning? That's an isolated problem. It's an outside external cause. Or do you get bad evaluations on every single rotation and maybe there's an internal problem that somebody needs to help you look at a little more. So that's where attribution comes in. Emotions, basically it's how you feel about a person or a thing. It's your anger, excitement, apprehension, sadness, grief. What you need to know about emotions is they're very short-lived. High energy and short-lived. Take a deep breath, walk away, count to 10, and then make your decision. Don't make emotional decisions. Attitudes, basically it's the predisposed way that you respond to something, whether it's positive or negative. And then job satisfaction and motivation we're going to talk about a little bit more. So job satisfaction basically is your attitude, positive or negative, towards your job, your coworkers, and your work environment. And motivation, that's more the forces that are within you that help account for the direction, level, and persistence of the effort that you expend at work. So how satisfied are you at the job? And then how motivated are you to continue doing a good job? And what you'll notice is these all, motivation and job performance and satisfaction, they all tie together. And by the time I'm done with this slide, you'll realize why I'm moving my hands everywhere. So if you start with motivation, what's your motivation for doing a good job? Well, if you're motivated, you're going to work hard. If you work hard, you tend to perform. But the other thing that happens is just because you work hard doesn't mean you perform well. You have to actually have skills to do that. And even if you work hard and you have the skills, if it's not what administration wants you to do, you're still not going to get a good performance score. And you're not going to be performing where you need to be. So once you actually perform, there's the personal value of the rewards that you get. The parent tells you, thank you so much. Well, if you don't care if the parent tells you thank you, then that's not going to help you a whole lot. If it means a whole lot to you that you made someone feel better and they told you thank you, then that actually makes you more satisfied with your job. The other part of this that comes into play is the contingency rewards. What grade did you get for the performance? What pay do you get for your performance? Does that mean a lot to you or does it not mean a lot to you? And before we get down here to the satisfaction part, there's this that comes in, and I used red arrows on purpose. It's the equity comparison. You both turn in an H&P. One of you took 40 minutes to write it, the other took 4 hours to write it. You both get the same grade. Who's going to be more upset if it was a good grade? The one who took 4 hours is going to be upset that the one who took 40 minutes got the same grade. You didn't put the same effort in. So what happens is we start comparing our personal values to other people's personal values, and we start comparing our rewards, our contingency rewards, to others. And if we don't think those are equal, well, I do the same job as she does, but she gets paid more than me. That affects your satisfaction. And then once you're satisfied, that goes back into motivation. But the other thing that you'll notice is this personal value of rewards doesn't even come all the way down here. It feeds back into motivation itself. And so that's where you have to value what you're doing and do it well, and then you'll do it even better, and it loops around this way, regardless if you're satisfied or not. Does that all make sense? How it all kind of ties together? Okay, so then let's shift over to teams. That's enough on individuals. We've done that a whole bunch. So what is a team? It's a group of people that are put together to complete a task. They tend to have complementary skills. Sometimes they have a vast range of skills because they have to complete a complex task. They have a common purpose, and they are collectively accountable. Everybody has a job to do, and the team's success depends on what everybody individually does. So what's teamwork? We threw all these people together, so now what do? Well, they accept and live up to the accountability. They actively work together, not independently in cubby holes here and there. They have respective skills that are used best to achieve the team goals, And everybody on the team is responsible for achieving that high performance, not just one person or the other. So why is this important? What does this have to do with anything? Well, there's this term called collective intelligence. So when you put all these people together, the capability of the group is much greater than the sum of all the individuals. So basically, the group itself is smarter than its components. So in medical school and residency, we would call this synergy. When you put everyone together, you create synergy. That's why teamwork is important. Because we could have each of you doing an individual job, but if it's not all connected, it just doesn't flow, and there's no synergy there. Working together, you get a whole lot more accomplished. So what affects the performance of the team? Because that's ultimately what we're talking about. Y'all all work in teams. In med school, you have small groups. You've got first years, second years, third years. In residency, you've got each individual class. You've got the ward team, you've got the PICU team, you've got the clinic team. Everything you do all day long within these walls is in teams. So what affects your performance? Well, the entry of new members. This happens often. Goals and responsibilities. What are the goals of the team? What are the responsibilities? That's going to affect how the team performs. Are there any delays or disputes that are causing problems and making decisions harder to come to? Personality friction. We talked a whole lot about that the last time I talked whenever we did the Myers-Briggs stuff. Conflicts. Conflicts are going to arise. We're going to talk about what a conflict is, how it happens, the whole process of it, and how do you take it all apart. So if you think about what affects team performance, here are common team problems. I know you see this and feel it and experience it every day. There's personality conflicts and differences. There's task uncertainties. You're not quite sure what you need to be doing. This competing goals. That's important. And an example of that is administration tells us that we have to see more patients every day. But the clinic's still open at 8. They still close at 5. But you also have to teach more students and residents at the same time. Those are two competing goals. Teaching residents and students takes time. Seeing more patients a day means you need to decrease the amount of time you spend with those patients. You can't do both at the same time. That's a competing goal. That causes problems in teams. There's the ambiguous agendas and ill-defined problems. I'm not quite sure why I'm here. What am I supposed to be doing? Well, if you don't know why you're here and what you're supposed to be doing, how are you going to perform well? Lack of motivation. I'm here because I was told I had to be. Let's get this over with. Don't care if I do a good job. I just need to do what I need to do so I can move on. How do you fix that? Conflicts with other deadlines and priorities. This is work versus personal time. You tell your wife and child, I am definitely spending time with you this Saturday, doesn't matter what happens. Your chief resident calls you Friday night and says, you are the only possible person that can work on Saturday because everybody else is sick, the flu is running rampant. That's a problem. That's where you end up with the conflicts of deadlines and priorities. Low enthusiasm kind of goes along with the lack of motivation. And then perceptions of poor team organization. You join a team and it is just complete and total chaos. Or at least that's how you perceive it. That's what you think. How are you going to perform on that team? Are you going to be organized and motivated to keep things going? Not if you think it's total chaos in the first place. So, if you know what affects the teams, what makes highly effective teams? Highly effective teams actually achieve high levels of task performance. They've got quantity, they've got quality, and they're timely. They do a whole lot, they do it well, and they do it in a short period of time. Everybody is satisfied. Everybody loves their job. They like what they're doing. Their experiences are positive, and it's meeting their own personal needs. The team is viable. Doesn't really matter what's thrown at you. Everybody is satisfied enough to continue working well together. So this, you'll see this probably medical students who choose to stay here for residency. That's kind of where this team viability comes in. You saw how the team of PEDS residents worked together and how they were satisfied when you were a medical student. So you chose to stay here and become one of them. And then you like it so much you stay on as faculty. So that's kind of your team viability part. You're satisfied and you want to continue working together. As faculty, if you're not happy, move on, get another job. There's academic facilities everywhere. And again, they offer synergy. So each individual contributes more when you put them together. Okay. I put that in there so I can take a drink. Okay. So, the other thing I put this in there for is just like kids, since we are pediatricians, did you know that teams have developmental stages? I had no idea that teams had developmental stages. Basically, teams are just children that need to be raised. They have developmental stages. And I found this fascinating whenever I was going through this part of the course that I took. So there's forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Part of the problem is, y'all switch services every 3, 4, 5 weeks. Forming and storming happen quite often. Norming occasionally. Performing and adjourning, that would be more of your medical school classes. When you get to be a 4th year class, you start performing well together as a class. Residency, 3rd year residents tend to end up in the performing stage, and then after you graduate, you end up in the adjourning stage. There's some committees here in this hospital that go through those, but as a medical student and a resident, you experience these first 3 a whole lot more than anybody else. So forming, it's when it comes together. New people are here. Here's the questions. What can this group offer me? What am I going to be asked to contribute? Can my needs be met at the same time that I contribute to this group? We need to get to know each other. You all right? Okay. Need to get to know each other. What behaviors are acceptable within this group? What can I do? What can I not do? What's the real task of the team in defining group roles? So if these are the things that people are thinking when teams get formed, answer them quickly and up front, and it will prevent problems later. On day 1, sit down with your team and answer all these questions. Because the biggest part about conflict resolution is getting rid of the underlying problems. Well, if the underlying problem is that I don't know the answer to these questions, let's just fix that up front. So after you get over all this is week 1. About week 2, definitely the beginning of week 3, you start storming. Everybody's tired and emotional. There's tension. There's infighting. There's been all these changes. I don't know what the heck's going on. There's all these little cliques, and they do all this, and they leave me out, and they don't tell me what's going on. At some point, your expectations need to be clarified. And that's kind of what happens within all this. And when you're having all this going on, nobody cares about what the team goal is. They just see all the obstacles in the way of the day, and they're just trying to get around those. You start learning everybody's styles. You definitely know who's organized, who's not. How do you deal with it? And compromises need to be made, and everybody, basically your own needs need to be satisfied. But this is the storming part. Again, this is about week 2, beginning of week 3, when you're on the ward or when you're in clinic. So just think about this. And again, if you can fix the forming, if you can answer all the forming questions, a lot of the storming stage isn't going to happen and not be quite as stormy. So then norming. Everybody thinks this is where the group clicks and this is where they really start their high performance, but it's really not. This is just, you come together, you're coordinated, but underneath all that, we understand what we need to do, and so we're just going to put our head down and do our job. And we're not going to rock the boat. That's what this norming stage is. But if you keep working together, all this stuff that you're just kind of pushing aside and putting your head down and going and doing your job, it's eventually going to rise to the surface, and it has to be dealt with. Once that's dealt with and overcome, then you end up in the performing stage. We see a lot of this later in our second-year resident class, definitely in our third-year resident class. There's total integration. That group is mature, it's organized, it functions well, you can complete complex tasks, it doesn't take you a whole lot of time. The internal disagreements have already been dealt with kind of in creative ways. Everybody tends to be motivated by the team goals, and usually everybody's satisfied. Okay? So the most common place I see this is in the end of the second year of the residence and the third year. Med-Peds is a smaller group. They have less personalities, so they have less personality conflicts. So you definitely see this in the third and fourth year Med-Peds group. And then adjourning stage. So this is where you've done your job, the team disbands, but if needed, they come back together, they do what needs to be done, and then they go away. And then they can come back again if they need to. So we also see this in our residents that have graduated and they're all out in private practice. They all meet up at the National AAP conference. And they all start talking about problems that they have in their clinics. And they actually fix those problems talking amongst each other, and they take it home. And then the next year they meet and they talk about something else. They don't realize that that's what they're doing, but they are. And so being able to convene, do your job, adjourn, and reconvene later, that's the long-term test of team success. And that's really what we want here. Okay? So, enough about teams, interpersonal processes. Basically, this is how you improve the team process, improve the communication, and improve decisions. And that's where conflict comes in. Okay? So, different types of conflict. So, you disagree over what the goals are. Don't really know how you're going to accomplish those. There's emotional, interpersonal difficulties. You're angry with someone, you don't trust them, you don't like them, you resent them. Functional, this is actually good. Functional conflict is beneficial. It's positive. It actually creates opportunities for creativity. You actually want functional conflict within your team. Dysfunctional is bad. This is the person that just throws their hands up, pushes their papers aside, says F it, and storms out. They're still a part of your team, but they're not contributing in any way other than causing chaos. You don't want that. So basically, to resolve conflict, you have to get rid of the underlying reason. It's not always real easy to do. Sometimes it's easier to prevent the underlying reasons in the forming stage of your team, putting your teams together. And it requires an understanding of the stages of conflict, potential causes, and different approaches to management. So we're going to talk about each one of these. So the stages of conflict. Something is there. I sense that something is there. I feel it and the tension is rising. And now everything comes to a head and there's a real problem. So once you manifest the conflict, you have to do something about it. It would be easier to do something about it somewhere in here so that the tensions don't rise and you don't have to act. But once you get to this point, you either need to resolve the problem, which means get rid of this. What happens more often is we just suppress it. So what's the problem with suppressing it? Nothing changes. It's like putting the Band-Aid on the lacerated artery. Doesn't fix the underlying problem. It's temporary, it's superficial, and it's all going to happen again, and probably worse than it did before. So you can't just suppress it. You have to figure out the underlying cause and get rid of that. So what are some of the underlying causes? Well, there's hierarchy. That's a problem. That happens at my house all the time. But why, Mom? Because I'm the mom and I said so. That causes conflict. Okay? And usually you're disagreeing on your resources, your goals, your deadlines, performance results. It's all the stuff that should have been laid out ahead of time at the very beginning. There's same level conflicts. Resident A thinks that this is the way it should be. Resident B thinks that it should be a different way. And those two ways aren't the same, and they get mad because they don't want to do it somebody else's way. It happens. And then role ambiguity is where your task expectation is unclear. We see this a lot with off-service residents that come in. They're not quite sure what they're supposed to be doing. I see this a lot sometimes in July, where the brand new MD says, I'm the doctor, and the nurse who has 20 years experience says, oh, really? You know, what exactly is your role? So if you don't know what your role is, and then contextual stuff, there's task and workflow interdependence. So basically, this is where I have to rely on you to do something so that we can get to the end goal. The biggest example of this, I have a patient who requires surgery. I can't take them to the OR. I have to rely on the surgeons to do that. Well, guess what? They have to rely on the OR schedule. They have to rely on anesthesia's ability and availability to be there to actually do the anesthesia for their case. And if there was a case in the room right before, they have to rely on housekeeping to turn over that room. So that's where task and workflow interdependence comes into play. There's a whole lot of that here. The ER wants me to get patients up to the floor. Well, we have to discharge people. Well, we can't discharge them until they have a ride. Even after they're discharged, housekeeping has to turn the room over. Then we need maintenance to bring up a crib because there's a big bed in the room. Structural differentiation. This is basically, there's two different teams that are pursuing two different goals, and they have different timelines for this. So this is where the business aspect of medicine and the art of medicine conflict. The business aspect, as many patients as you can, turn them over, get them out. We need to make money. You can't order those tests. It costs too much money. You have to do it as an outpatient. We know they're not coming back. They don't have a car. They don't have a ride. They live 4 hours away. You have to discharge them. You can't keep them overnight. That's the business aspect of medicine. The art of medicine is taking care of the whole patient and using all the resources that you can because it's what is in the patient's best interest. That's the structural differentiation that we deal with in this place. Domain ambiguities. That goes back to the business suit at the insurance company telling me the best way to treat my patient who has sepsis. It also goes back to the July 1 intern talking to the nurse who has 20 years experience. It also goes back to the third-year resident who's now working nights in the intensive care unit. The nurse and the doctor probably have the same level of knowledge, if not a little skewed, but one has more experience than the other, and that's where these domain ambiguities come in. Resource scarcity. So, everybody needs this one resource. We kind of talked about this yesterday on rounds. Facial trauma. ENT needs those cases. OMFS needs those cases. Back in the day, whoever was in the ER got that case. So guess what? Each service camped out a resident at the front door. Actually, the back door, because that's where they typically roll in on an ambulance or the helicopter, is the back door. So what did they do? They got creative. They fixed the problem. 1 month is ENT, 1 month is OMFS. 1 month is ENT, 1 month is OMFS. There's still a resource scarcity, but they figured out how to make it work. And then power and value asymmetries. You have two groups who have vastly different values, and they're forced to work together. I've got a one-word example for you. Congress. We're going to move on. Okay, so how do you manage conflict whenever it actually shows up? Well, we said there was indirect and direct means. Indirect, you decouple the processes that rely on each other. Some sort of way, you figure out how to make them work independently and not actually rely on each other. Put some sort of buffering mechanism or a liaison in there to help things work better. This is why we like RNs and MDs who still practice clinically to be part of administration in the hospital. They're kind of the liaison. Appeals to the common goals. So is there a mutually desirable conclusion? Can we make this work for everybody? Upward referrals. Well, I'm just going to call the boss. I'm not dealing with this. He can deal with it. Okay, that's temporary. That's just a form of suppression. You're not figuring out the underlying problem. You're just referring it up the chain. And then this altering scripts and myths. Basically, this is where somebody says, whatever, if that's how we always did it, we'll just do it that way. Okay, fine. So you resolve the current problem by saying, let's just do it like we always do, but it doesn't fix the reason that was a problem in the first place. And it's another form of suppression. So then there's the direct methods of dealing with conflict. There's lose-lose. You avoid it. You accommodate, or you compromise. There are win-lose, where you compete to see who wins, or I'm the boss and that's the way we're going to do it. Or more importantly, in my house, I'm the mom and that's the way I said we're going to do it. So one person wins, one person loses. What you really want are the win-win strategy. There's only one, and that's where you collaborate and you actually problem solve. So for those of you that like pictures and tables and you're more visually, this is kind of that in a table. And so basically you have one team over here and you're talking about how cooperative they are. And you have one team over here and you talk about how assertive they are. How bad do they want to satisfy their own concerns versus will they actually satisfy somebody else's? So, if you are uncooperative and unassertive, you just avoid everything. Just avoid it. Move on. Pretend like it doesn't even happen. If you're uncooperative and assertive, so one is not really going to cooperate with you, the other's very assertive, you end up with competition and authority command there. So you're just going to compete to see who wins out. I'm not going to cooperate with you, and I'm going to do what I want to do. Those are the two forces that are competing there. So then when you go up to the cooperative part, if someone's cooperative and the other group doesn't assert themselves, then you just kind of smooth things over and accommodate everybody. If it's kind of in the middle, I'll cooperate with you. Okay, I'll assert some of my own wants and needs into this. That's where you compromise. That's not, so your win-win is over here. Your win-win is where everybody cooperates and everybody asserts their own needs and their own concerns into the problem. So, all that requires negotiation. You got to sit and talk to each other. You have to negotiate. You have to figure out how you're going to make this work. And negotiation is just making a joint decision when the two parties involved have different preferences. That's all it is. And so conflict management requires negotiation. It can be a two-party negotiation. I'm going to sit with my resident, and we're going to talk about how we're going to make our team work better. There's a group negotiation. I'm going to sit with my team. It's the whole group. You tell me what you need. I tell you what I need. We figure out how we're going to make this work. There's intergroup. Red team sits down with the green team. We talk about what's not working, what we think would make it work better. So you negotiate amongst groups. And then constituency is an even bigger than that. And that's basically hospital and med school sitting down. How do we take care of patients while we teach you how to take care of patients? That would be an example of constituency negotiation. So strategies, you can distribute things, which means we have a pie, we cut it into pieces, and we each get a piece. Hard means you're going to compete. Somebody's going to get a bigger piece. Somebody's going to get a smaller piece. Soft negotiation means you compromise. We'll just cut it down the middle, even though I really need the bigger piece and you don't. Let's just cut the pie down the middle. Whatever. We'll just compromise. And then there's integrative. Integrative, you focus on the issues. What are the issues? What's the merits of those issues? How can we fix all this? And basically, you make the pie bigger. You get creative, you make the pie bigger. You figure out how to fit everything into one pie, and then you sort it out. It's a win-win. The problem with that is it's time, energy, and effort consuming. You can't just take the knife out, cut the pie, and move on. So that's a problem. It does take a lot of time. And so this is the graph of that. Distributive, you've got the pie, you cut it in half and move on. Whereas integrative, you make the pie bigger. Okay, so then organizational dynamics. This is basically where you continuously strengthen your resources and enhance employee performances. I snagged this off social media. I thought it kind of gave this meaning. Basically, it's amazing how work friends can turn into people you genuinely can't get through life without. That's kind of what we want. We want everybody to work in harmony and to work together. And it goes back to this. If everybody's satisfied with who they work with and how things are going, they're more motivated to work and they're going to perform better. So what's this power-based thing that I was talking about earlier? That's the last part of this. So basically it's your sources of power. It helps you navigate the political climates within the organization, and I will tell you the political part of organizational behavior is a whole nother animal, and I wasn't even going there. But if you build your power base, it'll help you advance your initiatives that are important to you. It helps you gain access to key resources, and most importantly, it keeps you from becoming powerless. You don't want to be a part of a team or an organization where you have no power. You have to have some power of your own to be an effective member of a team. And you're going to be a member of a team no matter what you do or where you go. So what is power? That's what I was talking about. It's your ability to influence and control some aspect of someone else or the group. There's position power, which basically plays into hierarchy. So I'm going to use our residency program as an example. And you can use this position power to get people to do stuff. So the Pediatric Resident Curriculum Committee has used their position power to mandate that residents go to conference. And they have to go to a certain percentage of conferences within a month to be acceptable. We tried saying, we're the boss, you have to do this. That's legitimate power, and that didn't work. So then we tried using rewards. You get less call. We'll buy you a Starbucks gift card. We'll buy you pizza next month. That didn't work either. So now we're into the coercive part of it. If you don't attend enough conferences, guess what? You have to prepare a conference and present it to a room that's scarcely filled and full of people that don't care that you're standing up there talking. You know how fun that is? Okay. Hopefully that works. It's happening. Personal power. This has nothing to do with where you fit on the hierarchy. It's just your relationships with others. So you can have expert personal power where you have a special skill that other people don't have. You can have referent personal power. This is just you are awesome and people respect you and they look up to you and they want to be like you and they want to have a relationship with you. That's what that is. Right, Dr. Bocchini? Dr. Bocchini has lots of referent power over us. Okay. He also has a lot of position power over us, too. But anyway, and then there's information power. This is where you have information or access to information that is valuable to others. My contacts list is my biggest information power piece that I have. How many of you call me and ask me if I have a phone number for somebody? That's my information power. Sassy's laughing back there. And then connection power. Association. Who do you know? Reciprocal connection power. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. I'll do this for you if you do this for me. So these are all the different ways that you can have power with what you do. And it doesn't matter what level you are. First year med students have personal information, connection. This personal power, I think the Gold Humanism Award is probably one of the best things we've done around here to give personal power to some of the lower level medical students. It's actually Solidarity Week for them this week. I saw the banner when I walked into the BRI today, which is perfect because it goes with this too. We're talking about how to work as a whole. So here's the key. You have to build your power bases before you need them. So figure out what is your competence, what can you do at a higher level that other people can't do that makes you competent. And you want to possess competencies that are hard to replace, that makes you valuable. If you're competent and valuable, guess what? You have power within your organization. And that's ultimately what you need so that you're not powerless. Be in the know. Know the information. Know the people. Know where to find stuff. That gives you information power. And then you want connection power. You need to network. I hear all the time when I need to get in touch with somebody on another service, the residents are like, oh, I know their chief resident, I'll call them. Guess what? That's connection power. You need that. Okay? So, here are our objectives. We talked about organizational behavior, how people behave within an organization, the importance of teamwork is synergy, characteristics that make teams highly effective. They work well together. They manage their conflicts well. We talked about different ways to handle the conflict. Basically, identify what everybody needs to do and answer all their questions up front. And if there is going to be conflict, figure out what the problems are and try to solve those. And then we talked about creating your power base. So those are our objectives. I was supposed to show you what we're going to talk about it, and then show you that we talked about it, okay? It's part of giving a lecture. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you that I told you. Okay, got it. So these are my references. So I'm going to go back to my original question. What does Valentine's Day have to do with teamwork? Valentine's Day is about love, sacrifice, and commitment. Define love a little bit differently than what you would in a marriage or a personal relationship. And that's what we've talked about. teamwork is really all about love, sacrifice, and commitment. And this boils down to having healthy relationships. Healthy relationship at home, because a marriage is really a team. Healthy relationships at work, because everything you do is in teams. And of course, when you're finally in a healthy relationship, when you feel loved and supported, you just look like a fluffy little bunny, and you're happy. Okay, I'm done.
That was great. So anybody who's worked with Marlene knows that not only can she talk about this, but this is the way she operates the hospital service, and we've had a lot of benefit from her approaching the team development and organization across sections, departments, services in this fashion. So I think it's a really good lesson on how you can apply these things. Questions or comments?
I did my job. Y'all have a nice day.